I guess the word for someone like me is a fujoshi? I'm not really sure. I'm a cishet woman who reads all sorts of comics, from horror to action to tragedy and ultimately romance. But what we see in BL manga specifically is a weird bastardization of man-to-man relationships. It has elements of romance, but it can have elements of a drama, tragedy, things you wouldn't find in stereotypical hetero romance comics. James Somerton was horribly exposed for all of his plagiarism recently, and piggybacking off of other creators. I really enjoyed the little bit of work I saw from him because I felt that it was important for me as a cishet woman to hear analysis from a non-cis hetero perspective. How great that ended up, right? But what's odd is that I'd wager most BL manga is written for me, and not for the stereotypical gay male eye. There's a fetishization of gay men in these comics that I don't feel is created from a gay man's perspective, and it's not for gay men at all. In my first video on this channel, I talked about Urumin, and I mentioned that as I was reading the manga, I could tell that Minori, the protagonist, was written by a man solely because of how she reacts to being assaulted in her sleep. I can't help but wonder if gay men are feeling a similar thing with BL and Yaoi comics. Side note, I live in Japan. I don't believe I mentioned this before, and in Japan the word is yaoi, 3 syllables, yaoi, but I'm embarrassed to sound like I'm being a tryhard every time, so I'll just say yaoi, which is totally not how it's said, and I recognize that. Pearl Boy is a comic that was one of my first entry points into the genre. Alongside others like BJ Alex and B-Class Guide, Pearl Boy brought something a bit different. It had a sort of elegance or beauty to it, I guess. You'll see in a minute what I'm talking about. Each panel looked glossy and flashy, and the whole thing, specifically the later panels, look super high quality. So what set this manhwa apart, and why are we talking about it in a negative way if it looks so beautiful? Well, let's tell the story of Pearl Boy. Warnings ahead, it is a bit graphic. Okay, it's a lot graphic, actually. Kang Du-shik has run away from Seoul. He was a male host at a gay bar and was one of their top scorers for his charisma and flashy extravagance. But now he's taken up refuge in a small rural town. His coworkers keep texting him, but he won't respond. He seems to have stolen some money from his job and made a run for it. Now he's running short on cash and doesn't exactly know what to do. In a desperate attempt at food, he decides to try to dine and dash at a local clam restaurant. The owner of the restaurant, a man we'll get very familiar with, tells our love interest, Jin Joo-ha, to keep an eye on Kang Du-shik. He looks extremely suspicious, according to the owner. Owner of the restaurant leaves, and Kang Du-shik waits until the restaurant is almost empty to try and make a run for it, but Joo-ha has locked the door. He cheekily asks Du-shik if he enjoyed his meal, and when Du-shik says he doesn't have any money, Joo-ha says he can work in other ways. Du-shik, being the player he is, automatically assumes he's talking about, the thing that normally happens in BL manhwa. But Du-shik is extremely miffed by that assumption and says that he just wants Du-shik to do the dishes. As they squabble though, a group of suspicious men are waiting outside the restaurant. They knock on the door and grimace at Joo-ha in a really menacing way. Instantly, Joo-ha's disposition changes and he tells Du-shik he'll pay for the meal, just get out as soon as possible. Du-shik is grumpy at first, but upon arriving to his hotel, he seems delighted to have gotten away with a free meal. He recalls a past incident with one of its younger coworkers, who was swindling customers at a host job for money. Du-shik scolded him and said he shouldn't try and get even more money because it'll just bite him in the ass later. Du-shik is grumpy now in the present day, and decides he should at least go back and pay for the meal. He knew better than to try to steal from a local restaurant. Now if it was Walmart, it would be completely ethical. Regardless, Du-shik approaches the store to try to pay for the meal and stumbles upon a shocking scene. Joo-ha is gagging up a hot dog, and the general scene just seems pretty violent, if you know what I'm trying to say. Multiple people are involved, and Joo-ha does not look happy. Well, Du-shik is shocked and runs away, bumping into some men who are quote-unquote waiting in line outside the building. He goes back to his hotel and grumbles that this must be a real hick town to have brothels. The next day, Du-shik goes to a job finding center and is put with the little old ladies of the hick town because he isn't super buff. He's put to go find things like shells as the tide goes in and out, hoping to find anything worth a bit of money. Basically, he's dumpster diving in the sea. Well, Dushik realizes that pearls are the most valuable items he could possibly find in the sea, and that would probably give him the most money for his labor if he's able to find them. So he goes and he starts going into the danger zone to try to find any pearls. The tide comes in and Dushik is swept under. We cut to the previous night, this time from Juha's perspective. We see that the men who were having their way with Juha hand the owner of the restaurant a small bag, saying, "Here's tonight's harvest." The owner is obviously upset by the small amount of little white balls in the bag, and tells Juha that he's gonna double the number of clients. Juha panics, saying he can't do that, but the owner says he can do whatever he wants since Juha is under obligation to repay the debt when the owner, quote-unquote, pulled him out of the gutter. We also see some pretty intense essay scenes from the owner onto Juha. It's clear that Juha is being pimped out against his will at this point. Anyway, back to present day. He has trouble getting to the surface, and it isn't until Juha decides to jump in and save him that these two love interests have any reason to ever interact again. While it feels a bit silly and not natural at all, I can overlook this by happenstance occurrence for these two to get entangled again. Well, he wakes up in Juha's apartment, and they have a bit of banter that showcases each of their personalities. Dushik also flashes Juha, which is kinda gross, not gonna lie, but for some reason Juha doesn't mind because Dushik's hot dog comes in size XL. Well, Juha's a saint, so he goes to buy dinner for the both of them before being approached by one of the men that frequents the clam restaurant after hours. He nearly gets R-worded in the alley, if not for a passing bystander. Juha, in a small move of covering himself as the assailant runs away, is especially heartbreaking. This signals to me that his pride is on the floor and he's trying to retain what little of it he has left. Selling oneself is fine when it's of your own volition. You can retain pride because you hold the key to your own body and give it to who you see fit. Juha doesn't have that key. The clam restaurant owner does. And now that random guy does. Who else can lay claim to Juha's body without his consent? It's honestly really heartbreaking. Anyway, he goes home and realizes that he absolutely can't go back to that restaurant later that day to face those disgusting gremlins. He snaps at Dushik and tells him to get the hell out of his apartment so he can try to produce the little pearls on his own. Dushik is flabbergasted again, saying things like, "Why did he put an egg in my ramen if he was just gonna kick me out anyway?" The next day, Juha gives the restaurant owner the pearls in a small sack, but the owner doesn't care. It's clear that the debt isn't about the money, because he's so eager to not give a crap about pearls that Juha has given him that are obviously worth a decent bit. He just wants to abuse Juha. Later that day, the night customers come to the restaurant during working hours and begin to harass Juha again. Things start to get really bad until Dushik appears and saves the day. When the night customers demand to know who he is, Dushik pulls a flyer out of his shirt and says, "I work here." The owner doesn't remember hiring him, but is forced to do so when the restaurant gets swarmed with all of the little old ladies who Dushik worked alongside. The owner and Juha alone obviously can't handle the crowd, so he reluctantly tells Dushik to get to work. Boom, Dushik and Juha are co-workers now. The sleazy bastard storms out, by the way. Well, later after work, Dushik is trying to schmooze a free drink out of Juha now that they're co-workers. Juha misunderstands this and thinks Dushik is trying to sleep with him, likely because Juha is, a walking ball of trauma by now, and storms off. Dushik is disgruntled again. Since this author loves putting Juha in horrible situations, he's jumped by late-night restaurant clients again, who decide that they won't wait for the owner to say it's okay, and they'll go ahead and claim Juha's body as their own right now. Dushik interferes again. Luckily, he's just there and beats them all to a pulp, taking embarrassing photos of them as blackmail and gives the pictures to Juha. Now he has some sort of recourse if they try and hurt him again. Juha does actually end up taking Dushik to go get that drink, and they have some nice banter before Juha passes out because twink is a lightweight trope. He carries Juha back to Juha's apartment and is about to kiss him when Juha starts hysterically crying in his drunken state. Dushik doesn't pursue this further. The next morning at work, Dushik tells Juha that he shouldn't lie down and take the mistreatment anymore. Pause. I genuinely don't like this part. While Dushik's advice is surface level good, obviously you should stand up to your bullies, he obviously doesn't understand the complex situation Juha's in just yet. Juha doesn't just lie down and take it. It's something that he thinks he has to put up with in order to survive. It's not a simple case of go stand up for yourself like putting an annoying coworker in their place. But yeah, the comic portrays this as a cute scene, so I'm probably thinking too much about it. Resume. The boss catches them being lovey-dovey and all flirty at work and mumbles to Juha that he'll have many clients today to make up for the other low harvest. Juha isn't looking forward to this. He hears footsteps behind him on his way home after work and attacks with a pair of scissors. Turns out that for some reason it's Dushik, and now he's randomly appeared for the third time. And this time Juha has accidentally cut his cheek pretty bad. Dushik explains that Juha looks scared leaving the restaurant, so Juha takes Dushik back to his apartment to clean up the wound. During this, Dushik is an absolute baby with the pain, and Juha is trying to hurry so he isn't late for work, leading them to end up in a precarious situation. It's then that Juha gets an idea. Why can't I just sleep with this buffoon and turn in the pearls instead of going to that wannabe brothel? So he does that, and Dushik is surprised but delighted, I guess. I don't have anything much to say about the erotic scenes, except that Dushik is not that selfish, I guess. One of the comments reads, "We love consent," over and over again, and despite these two characters not knowing one another, the author actually portrays a really loving and emotional and intimate moment between them with the erotic scene here. Maybe I'm just jaded by all the not so consensual BL comics out there, but yeah, Dushik gets placed highly on the tier list of characters because he gets consent. I guess the bar is kinda low. Dushik, after the intercourse, is concerned because literally beads, pearls, whatever comes out of Juha. He asks if they were kidney stones or if Juha is sick, to which Juha quickly and emphatically explains that he was just born like that. Dushik secretly takes one of the many pearls on the ground, confused as to what exactly they are. He gets it appraised at a local shop and sees how much it's worth, and turns out it's worth a lot of money. He runs into the late night clients in an alley where he overhears them talking about the pearls coming out of Juha. Dushik has a bit of a mind freak moment here, where he asks himself whether Juha is sleeping with those guys just to reap the monetary benefits of the beads that come out of him. He then worries if that's why Juha is sleeping with him as well. He goes to the restaurant where Juha is angry that Dushik didn't show up for the morning shift. We see that Juha has cut his hair and seemingly blushes when Dushik tells him that it looks pretty. It's clear that Juha holds Dushik in a completely different category than the late night clients, simply because of this small interaction. He asks if Dushik wants to come over that night, and Dushik almost asks if it's just about he wants to use him for the harvest of the pearls, but the owner of the restaurant comes in with his expensive car doing a little circle thing. He's extremely pissed that Juha didn't show up last night. He's assaulting him when Juha takes up Dushik's advice and grabs the same pair of scissors, threatens him, saying, "Don't touch me again." We learn here that the owner's grip on Juha isn't just about money, and Juha knows it. We'll get more backstory between the two later, but as Juha says, he knows that the owner just likes seeing Juha in pain. Juha says he'll give the owner as many pearls as he wants, but he isn't going to be pimped out anymore or used for his sick desires. The owner agrees to these terms for some reason, saying he and the new play toy can, quote, go mining for pearls however much they want. We see a small flashback with Dushik. At the moment he's eavesdropping on this, but he flashes back to being told by one of his coworkers back at the hosting job that Yeon-woo is just after money from him. Dushik runs in, I'm unsure why, maybe to confront Juha, but when he sees the scissors on the ground, he hugs him instead, saying he's happy Juha listened to him. The scene makes little sense, but I guess it's meant to be cute. We get another intercourse scene, and I guess it's about as lovey-dovey as the first. We see the owner watching a really grotesque video of Juha being used. It's actually really sick. It just goes to show how messed up of a person this owner really is. But again, I don't think we need to see Juha like that. It can be implied and be equally as disturbing without showing us getting things shoved into his... Yeah, it's really gross. It's a choice that I just don't think is necessary here. One thing that this author does repeatedly that will come up again and again is that they love to show Juha in pain and being abused. The next mini arc involves the owner. We finally get his name, Choi Pil-won. He visits the gay bar Dushik used to work at way back in Seoul and gets Chunbae, one of his co-workers, to come and convince Dushik to leave the small town and go back to Seoul. Chunbae is absolutely enamored by Pil-won because he likes sadistic rich guys, I guess. If only he knew what exactly this dude was capable of. Well, Chunbae bursts into the doors of the clam restaurant, and we see how Juha reacts when confronted with some bits of information about Dushik's past. Firstly, we learn more about this Yeon-woo character. It turns out that the money Dushik stole involved him in some way. Well, Dushik is able to convince Chunbei to go drinking with him. When Chunbei is too drunk to take the next train home, he crashes at Juha's apartment, where we get a weird scene of Juha and Dushik being secretively intimate while Chunbei is still in the room. I always found these kinds of scenes really gross and weird, at least in my opinion. But regardless, the next morning, Chunbei spots Dushik and Juha snuggled up and realizes he can't break them up because they're just so cute. He also has a private moment with Juha where he gushes over Pilwan. Juha warns him that Pilwan is not a good guy at all, and Chunbei should stay away from him, but he doesn't seem to get the message. Regardless, Chunbei leaves, his mission unsuccessful, but feeling generally positive that Dushik found someone he likes so much. The next incident occurs after Chunbei leaves. Juha and Dushik are out buying cups, bowls, toothbrushes, etc. for Dushik to use as he lives with Juha. Oh yeah, you missed that part? That he just let Dushik move in. It was only briefly mentioned, and it felt a bit out of the blue when I read it as well. So yeah, Dushik and Juha go around buying lots of stuff, and Dushik steps away for a minute. A drunkard woman approaches Juha and calls him a clam that spreads his legs wide for any man that comes along, publicly humiliating him. It turns out that she is this bastard's wife. Well, Juha feels absolutely terrible and runs away, but not before Dushik is about to pummel the older lady. He runs after Juha but can't seemingly find him until it's nighttime for some reason, and it's raining. Juha has a fever, because of course he does, and Dushik takes him to the nearest motel to rest up since they're a bit far from the apartment. After he rests up, Juha seems to have some real separation anxiety here and begs Dushik to not go anywhere. He starts crying, saying that he heard Dushik talking to Chunbei about potentially going back to Seoul and how much he doesn't want Dushik to leave. Dushik isn't an awful love interest by any means, but I can't help but also feel like Juha just feels like he can finally breathe when he isn't being constantly taken advantage of by the horrible men around him, and that might be why he's latching onto Dushik so much. Anyway, Dushik tells Juha that he'll just be going back to Seoul to sort out something, and he won't be long at all. Juha is seemingly embarrassed by his little outburst, but Dushik finds it cute. The next morning, Dushik is gone, and all the pearls they made last night are also gone, and all Juha finds is Pilwan sitting in the room. Pilwan has spliced together some audio from a call framing Dushik as if he stole all the pearls and skipped town, scamming Juha. Juha doesn't believe it, but he also can't get a hold of Dushik. In fact, we see that Dushik has been kidnapped. End of season 1, yippee! The next few scenes are super dramatic and pretty well paced for an emotional manhwa and the opening of season 2. Not so much for a brief summary, so we'll skip ahead. Juha gets R-worded by Pilwan, and we see in his flashbacks his actual history with Juha. Juha's mother owned the clam restaurant, and Juha was sleeping with Pilwan. Eventually, Pilwan seduced Juha's mother as well, with promises of money and to save her from poverty. So he slept with both Juha and his mother at the same time. Juha hated this and wanted to break things off with Pilwan, but he was absolutely enamored by the boy and wanted to quote-unquote save them. Juha says they were doing just fine before Pilwan came along, but Pilwan begins to get more and more controlling. Eventually, Juha's mom is murdered by debt collectors. Pilwan buys the restaurant so long as Juha works for him, and that's how we got to present day. That's the debt that Pilwan keeps holding over Juha's head. Dushik beats up everybody in his way and somehow escapes his captors. Juha throws a potted plant at Pilwan's hand, resulting in an injured eye. Juha runs away to the clam restaurant and tries to commit S-word by slashing one of the pipes. I guess it's paper. He can slash it, so I don't know what it is, but I guess it's a pipe. That directs the gas to the stove, so he's trying to die of gas inhalation. Dushik arrives just in time and saves Juha before the restaurant bursts into a gas fire. Also, Pilwan is there for some reason and gives us the final line of the Boonies arc. In the opening of the next arc, we see Dushik about to unalive Pilwan, but Pilwan taunts him, saying that Dushik won't be able to return to this life if he goes, quote, back to that one. There's a camera nearby as well, so Dushik would be on video committing murder. So he decides to not, and Pilwan continues his taunts. He says that Dushik must have stolen the nice clothes that he's wearing because all that suits him are cheap gray sweatpants. He says that Juha, if behaved, could have anything he ever wanted in his life if he gave up his bodily autonomy to Pilwan. He also says that Dushik has nothing to offer Juha, and he doesn't even have a plan. Dushik takes a passed out Juha and drives away. When Juha wakes up in the car, he's convinced Dushik has betrayed him still and demands that the car be pulled over. Juha tries to run away and threatens to throw himself over a bridge if Dushik gets too close, but Dushik is able to subdue him. They sleep together in the car after Dushik proves he didn't betray or ditch Juha. Anyways, the couple go to Seoul, which is a huge city, which is a completely different location than the boonies they lived in before. Dushik puts Juha on a bed so he can rest in some apartment that isn't explained. I guess it's hinted at that this is Dushik's old apartment when he lived in Seoul, but why on earth is it still vacant, and why on earth is he still able to get in? I have absolutely no idea. Well, Dushik leaves while Juha's asleep and goes to see a character we'll get pretty familiar with from now on, Madam Hyung. He's a gay gangster that owns most of the male brothels in Seoul, and also has a soft spot for Dushik. We skip to the next morning where Juha wakes up with a horrible nightmare. It's here I gotta mention that there's been an operation hinted at time and time again that I haven't said in this video yet. I put off talking about it for as long as I could because frankly, if I tell you straight up what it does, there's a good chance I couldn't post this video. Okay, so it gives substances to intoxicated individuals and then performs otherwise intimate acts on them unconsensually, and then illegally distributes the video. Juha was one of their victims. Hopefully that's wordy enough and the language is neutral enough. Anyway, Juha was having a nightmare about that operation and Pilwan. He wakes up and sees Dushik beside him sleeping, which calms him down a bit. When Dushik wakes up, Juha tells him he kind of wants to go back to the boonies just to see the ash and remnants of the restaurant. Dushik tells him to wait to do that because he has to recover. Juha says, no, I'm fine, I really want to go, and Dushik keeps pushing for him to stay in the apartment, hiding behind his cheery golden retriever-like persona. The author does a really good job here though, showing slight panels where it's clear Dushik is thinking or concerned about something. I love this show not tell piece of storytelling that they've got. Enjoy it now because it won't last for long. We cut to a flashback of last night with Dushik's meeting with Madam Hyung. He says that he'll join Madam Hyung's gang officially if he vouches to protect Juha and writes off the money Dushik stole as his first paycheck. Apparently, Madam Hyung always wanted Dushik in his gang before Dushik skipped town, so Madam Hyung agrees. We time skip. Juha is at the park with Dushik, and he's starting to see literal hallucinations of Pilwan. We time skip again. Dushik is leaving to go on his first job for Madam Hyung. Meanwhile, Juha leaves the apartment in the middle of the night, running away. Dushik barely survives the job for Madam Hyung and is taking precautions by coming up with some kind of story to tell Juha that relates to his injuries so that Juha doesn't get worried. But when he sees Juha has left and has left a little note, he loses it. He even resolves to himself that it couldn't have been Juha who wrote that goodbye letter. Madam Hyung gets Dushik out of jail when he storms Pilwan's company and gives Dushik a big scolding. He tells Dushik, no wonder your lovers always leave you. All you do is run around like a lunatic. Who would want to be with a guy like that? Even if you're willing to go through hell for that boy, is that what he wants? And for the first time in the comic, Dushik breaks down crying. The next few chapters show us Juha setting up a new life in some different rural town. He sees a psychiatrist, but the medicine doesn't help with his hallucinations. The only thing that helps him clear his head is when he gets a part-time job butchering fish. His life is simple, and he finds it miserable, even though he's trying to convince himself he doesn't miss Dushik at all. Well, Dushik, along with the help of Madam Hyung's information team, is able to track down Juha. Juha is absolutely shocked to see this, but Dushik tells him he's already sent all of his stuff back to Seoul. Through the power of words, he's able to convince Juha to come back with him. When Juha returns, he sees that Dushik has gotten a new apartment. In this new apartment, they're pretty lovey-dovey, but we see that Pilwan for some reason has the apartment bugged. This never comes back, and this is never mentioned again. But yeah, Pilwan has the apartment bugged. The next day is filled with cute little dates between Juha and Dushik, but Dushik gets a call from Chunbae, remember him, the guy that Pilwan brought from Seoul to try to get Dushik back, who says that Yeonwoo, okay, do you remember him? He's Dushik's ex. That was the reason Dushik stole money and ran to Seoul. Is dead. Yeonwoo is dead. Dushik's ex is dead. At his funeral, which Dushik sneaks out to attend, we learn that Yeonwoo died begging for more substances from the same operation that Juha was victimized by, except Yeonwoo went there willingly and he liked it. When Dushik hears about this, he seems sad but otherwise unfazed. He wants to go back to his apartment to see Juha again, but on his way back to the car, he hears this guy, the leader of the operation, asking when Mr. Pilwan will give them back the pearl fountain. Gross. It looks like Pilwan's made a deal. If he's able to get Juha back, he's likely going to force him to be victimized like this again. Well, Madam Hyung begins to make some connections. It turns out that he knew about the operation when his businesses in Seoul started to gain traction. In addition, he knows that Yeonwoo died from it. And he spots Juha about to go to buy cigarettes and is frozen in shock when he recalls that he's seen Juha in videos from that same operation. Things happen one after another as Madam Hyung tries to get more information. We learn that Choi Pil-won is financially backing that operation, and that's likely how Juha got involved in the first place. Well, this all culminates in Madam Hyung meeting Choi Pil-won, who says that he has no hard feelings towards Madam Hyung, but in order to show Ju-shik and Juha what hell truly feels like, Madam Hyung has to die. Madam Hyung hears this and just laughs in Choi Pil-won's face. Juha and Du-shik have a sweet moment after Yeonwoo's funeral. Oh wait, never mind, Du-shik is called down by Madam Hyung's right hand. Right hand doesn't like Du-shik and has caught on to the fact that Du-shik is using the crime syndicate that Madam Hyung runs as a shield from Pil-won's attacks. Right hand tells Du-shik to take Juha and just skip town forever. Du-shik doesn't wanna because he knows that unless Pil-won goes down, he and Juha will always be on the run and will always be in danger. Season 3, okay. I hate to spoil, but Season 3 just kind of sucks. It's worth noting here the issues that went into the making of this comic. So, originally, the manhwa was authored by Zoy and illustrated by Inking. You may have noticed that the art went through quite a drastic change throughout this comic, and it really went full force after Zoy quit the project. It's speculated, according to this comment I found off Reddit because I really can't find anything about this controversy, that they just got into a heated argument so Zoy left. And the quality of the writing really starts to go downhill at this point. There's intimacy every few chapters, and the once loving and consensual intimacy now has scenes of Juha crying violently and begging Du-shik to stop. What I felt was once a generally thought out story now has a bunch of randomly inserted facts. For example, a character sheet earlier in the comic said that Pil-won was the youngest of 4 siblings. Likely, the siblings were going to make an appearance at some point, but now Pil-won is not only the head of some tech company, but is an only child, and his dad is also the leader of a political party. I'm just overall a bit confused. Also, there's another retcon where earlier I did say in the video that Juha's mom was killed by debt collectors. Now they changed it and said that she actually committed S-word after Pil-won broke up with her. Anyway, so there's a pair of twins that I didn't know were twins until just now. Twin number 1 is this guy, who you may have seen before. He's in charge of the operation. He administers substances to their victims, and he's the eye twin. The other twin is this guy, the lip twin, and he's basically the dog of Choi Pil-won right now. Well, these twins get into a fight, and eye twin decides to kidnap Juha to make another video for some reason because he thinks it'll please Pil-won, and somehow that'll repair the damaged relationship between him and lip twin. See, this is what I mean. The motivations just don't make sense. Anything to show Juha with a ball gag collar and crying violently, I guess. Well, Dusha breaks in, saves Juha, gets shot, wakes up. Also, I-Twin seemingly unalives himself, but he actually doesn't. JK. Pause. I just want to say that every character's small gestures of showing their innermost thoughts has completely stopped by this point, and instead are supplemented by bubble thoughts. Resume. The couple sleeps together at the hospital because of course they do. But here's the thing. Du-shik facilitates the R-word of lip-ring twin because of his involvement with the operation. Let me say that again. Du-shik, the golden retriever silly boy who hates gangsters, gathers a bunch of men and has them R-word lip-ring twin as punishment and revenge for what they did to Juha. Like, what the actual hell? I don't know, nor do I care about the argument of, well, they deserved it. They did it to someone else. In a manhwa, that is gross. We shouldn't be free to R-word people just because we feel like they've done something wrong. I don't think I need to say that. At least we shouldn't be glorifying that behavior. That scene was such a shock and so gross, and it lasted for like 3 chapters. I think here it's clear what Inking's writing is like versus Zoy's. It's very difficult for me to believe that this is where the story planned to go from the beginning, because basically we're seeing Du-shik turn into Pil-won. And this kind of seems like the point a few chapters later. I thought, maybe actually I'm supposed to think he's turning into Pilwan. Juha's very angry at Dushik for what he did. But fast forward a few chapters later, where Dushik is able to use that to get the twins to confess to the operation, getting Pilwan into some really, really boiling water. So at the end of the day, the manhwa treats that R-word scene as a means to an end to bring down Pilwan, which it completely isn't. I'm skipping a lot of convoluted backstory here. For example, Lip Ring Twin was also exploited as a child, so this isn't the first time losing agency of his body. But yeah, overall, it's just a horrifically gross scene for no reason. You could have written this in any other way. The revenge R-word doesn't add anything meaningful to the plot, and it just turned Dushik into a villain. And there's nothing interesting about seeing two villains battle it out. Well, Pilwan is screwed over in the public eye when a video goes live exposing his deeds, and the Eye Twin taking the fall so that he could pull Pilwan down with him, in exchange for Lip Ring Twin being safe. Blah blah blah. We end up with a face-off between Dushik and Pilwan, where Pilwan is pointing a gun at Dushik. So Pilwan's pointing the gun at Dushik, right? Then Juha runs out of the apartment and tells Pilwan that if he's gonna shoot someone, it should be him instead. Okay. Then Pilwan agrees, saying, "You're right," and points the gun at Juha. Okay. But then he immediately backtracks and says, "Well, Dushik, if you jump off the cliff, then I won't shoot Juha." So then Juha tackles Pilwan and they both fall off the cliff. But then Dushik jumps off the cliff with them. Eye Twin is who fishes them out of the water, who was watching nearby and says, "You can't die until you tell me where my brother is." I mean, it worked. Dushik woke up. Dushik learns that Eye Twin finished off Pilwan, except he actually didn't, because we see later in the epilogue that he got arrested. Anyway, Juha doesn't wake up and is in a coma. When he wakes up, he's lost his memory of Pilwan and even his mother passing away. He still thinks she's alive out there somewhere. That's really sad. Dushik starts dressing exactly like Pilwan, and they open a restaurant together. Juha smiles more easily now without remembering all of the trauma of Pilwan or the operation or anything like that. But oh my god. Okay, so this ending is horrendous. Okay, stay with me. Juha runs across some ice, falls in, regains his memory for like a couple seconds. Dushik follows him, also falls in, and they drown together under the ice. I swear I'm not making that up. Some people seem to be coping and thinking that they didn't drown together, but the epilogue goes back in time to when Juha woke up, as opposed to forward in time to Juha now with his memory back. I think it's pretty clear that they drowned. This is the latest point that we are ever given in the series, right? Now you're probably feeling the same sense of emptiness, like what was all of that for? And that's unfortunately the unintentional message that poor boy leaves us with. What is all our suffering for? It's for nothing. We suffer for nothing because the ending sucks and it was always gonna suck. This manhwa tried to beautify the disgusting, and this is how it turned out. It turned into a soap opera, convoluted plot lines, abandoned plot points, and a ruined character. It's clear that Inking struggled with the writing for Pearl Boy without Zoe's help. I can't help but wonder what the original plot for Pearl Boy was, at least to Zoe. This is my Snyder cut. I just want to know what the Zoe cut was. I think with comics, most of the credit always goes to the illustrator, because in many instances, they're also the writer. But when there is a writer, their role is just as important. There's plenty of great manga where the art is questionable or in a really weird style, but the story is absolutely fantastic. I'm flashing a few on screen right now. I also think there's something to be said about the BL genre and trauma. Before James Somerton was caught, his video on killing stalking, for everything horrible it did, pointed out the key fact, probably someone else's key fact, that there's a weird trend in BL comics where they build a relationship with the grossest starting materials possible. Degradation, SA, harassment, trauma, they're all par for the course for many, many series. And I don't know about you, but they just aren't that fun for me to read. It hurts to look at that, to have these characters take up so much of my headspace just to have them suffer. I'm hoping that we go into a new wave of BL comics that shows that queer identifying young couples can be happy. And that's enough. They don't have to be degraded all the time. But thank you for embarking on this journey with me. Let me know what you think of this comic in the comments. How would you have made the comic better? What are some comics you'd like me to cover next? And let me know what you prefer, udon, soba, or ramen. Personally, I like udon. Okay, thank you. See you next time. Bye bye.